Good morning. Good afternoon. Today is May 23rd, 2026, and it is 5:20 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguilar Marcano, and I'm recording this from my office at the 2302 Britton Ridge Drive. And this property is located 300 feet away from a cluster of houses. One belongs to Robert Mueller, who is a former director of the FBI. The other one to Reverend King, in front of Mueller, and he's an attorney slash reverend in a church that advocates for no religion. And then next to him, there is the property of Robert Bob S. Clark, who is a prominent family law attorney here in Katy, Texas. And next to him, we have Terrell Miller, who is a prominent intellectual property attorney, a partner at a firm that works for Huawei, the Chinese company. And all these, may seem random, but this is very relevant to all this. And if you made it to this point, you probably already know why. Anyhow, this is declaration D136 part 3.5. So the third segment, part 5. And I'm sorry for splitting them in such an intricate way, but it's really the only way to organize it because because of the live case with the Capias, I hadn't recorded one of these, and in like 10 days when I started recording this segment, and it's a lot of different things in different categories, I would say. So I had to split it. So, but this one is going to be dedicated more to smaller items. Like these are things that are not really. I guess, right? They will have, I guess, probatory value, and they will probably provide valuable leads and evidence, right, to anybody that investigates these things. But like they're not like super high level things. And I also have some technical things that I discovered that I would like to share because I think they are. Those are very important. They're awesome discoveries. You'll see what I mean when I get there. So it's gonna be kind of a mix, right? And I'm sorry about that because I know some people will not be so inclined on the technical side of things, and some people would not be inclined towards the legal things. So may not be a. So let me start with a short update to kind of close the loop on the legal updates of the previous parts. I was mentioning that I filed this new motion for a de novo hearing on the trial court on the 37th, asking for a de novo hearing for the Capias, for that hearing where the Capias originated, because I was never invited to that hearing, and they delayed showing me even the order signed. Right? The order signed is not even the docket at this point, being May 23rd. And it was signed, according to the docket, it was signed on May 15th. So it's been 8 days and they haven't entered. So this basically, cuts off my right to ask for a de novo hearing because it has a 3 days limit, 3 business days limit. And because they have taken 8 days and they haven't produced the actual order, I cannot ask for a hearing. So anyhow, I did that, and that is a mandatory motion. The nature of that motion is mandatory, and it makes it so. The family code, Texas law, makes it so that the judge has no discretion. He has to open that document. He has to read it, and when he reads it, he's gonna become aware, right, of the serious crimes that have been committed against the court, not against me, against the court. And I imagine he will have no choice but to report this to his boss, at the very least, right? If not, to the DOJ. Anyhow, so I that's what I did in the morning, right? And in the previous segment, I said something like, well, and I have 2 other hearings. In fact, I have more, right? Because in every hearing that they have not invited me to the hearing, I have the right to do this, so I could create more. But in the previous segment, I said, I could file similar motions for the hearings of September and I explained why. Right, there's a reason. The timing, the way they scheduled the hearing it seems designed. It's very unlikely that this was random. It seems designed to exactly do this, to preclude me from having any recourse, including the recourse to a de novo hearing motion. But this makes it so that the time of 3 days that it's codified in the law never really started. So I still have that right. And I say that I will exercise it after the Capias. But then I kept running the pipeline still. I still have it running, and the pipeline started flying a bunch of things, right? So I started getting into the graph of criminal liability for things like obstruction of justice and things like that. So I became curious, and I asked Gemini. Um, and it's the case, right? Like, I mean, in a case like this, right, where the person that is being subject to the capias order reported the judge signing the order or signing the order for capias, right? And also reported the clerk that would eventually sign that capias. I reported the clerk as well to the IRS, not only the judge, right? Um, so these two individuals that I reported to the DOJ are signing documents that will result in capias, says, I guess it's a plural, and the capias itself will result in my arrest, or could result in my arrest, right? So anyhow, the pipeline got into a path in which, looking at the book, what it implies is that if I file the other motions, like for example, the motions for the September hearings, if I file that and if the judge decides to ignore the four motions, then the pipeline gets, I mean, the scenario that it builds gets into the realm of criminal obstruction of justice, which is a very serious thing, right? So that is not now. It's not about harm under the color of the state law or the privation of civil rights or things like that. It's getting into a path of criminal liability. Serious criminal liability is related to obstruction of justice. Of course, this is in the event that he decides to ignore the motions, to close his eyes and pretend that the motions don't exist. Now, if there's another path in which he could still save the day, right? Save the situation by looking at the motions, becoming quote unquote aware of the serious fraud against the court that the Adams law firm, J. Troy Pickett and Morgan Heibner have committed through the last year, in combination with the clerk and the scheduler, right? So he would have to throw the scheduler and the clerk under the bus, but he could do that and he could save the day. And in that case, it doesn't get into the path of criminal liability for the court itself, only for the quasi-judiciary office. Right? So I mean, that's the way it looks. So when I see all that, I decided, well, I'm going to file the motions on the 37 because, well, I'm going to create more leverage. Right? The more leverage I have, the more liability they see, is the more likely that I'm going to be able to break this situation. Right? So that's what I did. I filed those two motions and I submitted them being today, May 23rd, 2026. And I did this in the afternoon, like at 4 p.m. And then I also escalated this to the Supreme Court of Texas because now, before I had filed a motion with the Supreme Court of Texas saying, I have these two pending motions for de novo hearings that the judge is going to ignore or is ignoring. Right? He's already ignoring them. And I asked for the removal of the judge. So now I'm not asking for a recusal, for a rule, for a rule on a simpler motion for recusal of the judge. I'm asking for the judge to be removed because my argument is that by not ruling on those mandatory motions, he is really abdicating to his job as a judge. So he's not acting as a judge anymore. And therefore he should be removed. So if you're not going to do your job, you shouldn't be there. Right? At least in my case, like maybe he could be still the judge for other cases, but for my case, obviously he can't. He doesn't want to be the judge. Right? So I mean, for the motions of Troy Pickett, he wants to be the judge immediately, without delay. But for my motions, he's not the judge. So I mean, that's my argument, right? But my original motion was for those two de novo hearings that I had filed in the morning. But because now I filed two more, I, basically changed my motion. I filed a new one, including the four. Right. So now this is in the Supreme Court of Texas. That these four things, which are motions for de novo hearings on the 37th, for hearings in which they either didn't invite me or they violated my right to ask for a de novo hearing because of the way they scheduled them with the scheduler and the delay they created intentionally on signing the orders. So and then serving me the orders. Like in some of those instances, I even have received the order. Like in the case of the capias, I haven't received the signed order yet, right? And it was supposedly signed 8 days ago. And the same with the order index 89. It was signed on October 15, according to the docket. And according to the docket, I have not received a copy of this document. It's written in the document. So after I don't know November, December, January, February, March, April, May. After 7 months, I still haven't received a formal copy of, from the clerk telling me this is the signed order 89. I haven't received that yet in 7 months. And the child has been held and my parental rights stripped from me by this order that, according to the own docket, I haven't received yet in 7 months. Imagine that. So anyhow, I filed that with the Supreme Court of Texas. Right? So now, I mean, this is a situation that it's, let's see what happens. So that's the quick update I wanted to give you on that. Let me share my screen with you for a second. I have this document here going on, in which I have basically my talking points, but I want to show you the actual motion that I filed in the Supreme Court of Texas. I mean, it's not yet stamped, but I filed it, right? So it should be stamped on Monday. And it describes the issue with the de novo hearings and the 4 motions that I filed in order, and asking for removal of the judge as I'm done. And attached to these are the actual motions, right? So the Supreme Court of Texas, which one of which is already stamped on 5/15. So here you can see that on 8 days, the judge has not taken any actions on this mandatory motion. That it's time sensitive because there is a child that is kidnapped using the sequence of events of April 2025, which is what this is about. So anyhow, I don't know. If it amounts to obstruction of justice, it's nuclear because it's a lot of time, and that is a lot of leverage. So let's see what they do with that. So let me go back to my talking points. So now let me tell you, the talking points I have here, these are notes that I wrote as I was debugging things. Right? These are not very well structured. They may have typos. I'm not going to invest time because I have a lot of things to do. But I'm not going to invest time in cleaning up this document yet. But I don't want to delay offering you this information. So excuse the typos and the grammar errors. These are like raw notes that I wrote as I was trying to understand things. So what I'm gonna do, because they're so convoluted, I'm gonna read them right out loud, and then I'm gonna try to make sense of what I wrote, because some of these things I wrote more than a week ago. So I don't remember exactly what I wrote. So let me start with. So this is the comment about how I'm scaling out this strategy of the de novo hearing request motion, which I just did on May 23rd, 2026. In the next note, I have between May 11 and May 13, 2026, I filed individual notices of appeal for all the void orders. The distributed appeals strategy in describing declaration D136. We talked about this before. And I wrote 2 appellate cases that are important: 0126 00511-CV and 0126 00510-CV. In the next note, I write May 14, 2026. Yes, so this is that day where they were having that hearing. I think this was May 14, exactly, when they were having that hearing that at the end resulted in this chaos with the capias, right? So I saw in the docket that there was a hearing. I didn't even know. I learned about the hearing the night before or the same morning, something like that, because they never sent me. And I learned about it because I logged into the website of the court, and I saw the docket, and I saw that there was an entry for a hearing that morning. So anyhow, before the hearing starts, I had already filed the notices of appeal for these orders that they were going to talk about in this hearing, to find me in contempt, to then create the capias, right? So what I did, I already filed the notices of appeals, but I had not paid the fee. There's a fee that you have to pay in the first court of appeals, and you do that by filing a copy of each notice of appeal. And when you do that, the system charges you $205 with taxes for the processing fee. So anyhow, what I'm saying here is that before they started the hearing, I paid the fee for the appeals. This is important because this gives me legal standing, as the orders are legally under appeal. If I don't pay the fee, they still have some latitude to say, well, you filed the notice, but you didn't pay the fee. So the thing is not really appealed yet. And we can find you in contempt and put you in prison. So what I'm telling you here is that I filed the fees before the hearing began. So that makes that hearing void as well, because they cannot be having a hearing for enforcement on an order that is officially under appeal. That is not allowed. Beyond the fact that the court is under an automatic stay, but compound to that, that also the orders of themselves that they're seeking enforcement for are under appeal, and they're doing this with the capitals. Right? So this is what this note says. Yes, I also added a note here. I added something that says, I think this could be a good, I mean, it's more for analysis, right, of things to like do postmortem, something like that of other cases. So I note that when they created the order on April 2025, they harassed me with that order, legally speaking, right? Like keeping the child, secreting the child, things like that, for about 6 months. And then they created the hearings of September, and that resulted at the end in the other order of October 15, 2025, which is Index 89, which was signed without jurisdiction because my second verified motion to recuse got into the docket before getting the Index 88, immediately before the order. So that means the order was signed without jurisdiction. But put that aside for a second. Um, so what I'm noting in this note is that then they created that order in October, and they've been harassing me with that order from October to April, which is also 7 months. So it occurred to me that maybe the lifespan of these void orders, for some reason in their system, they create them for 6 months and then they rotate them. Right? Seems like a systematic. It's observational because I only have two occurrences of this, but it might be something to keep in mind. Like if you're debugging other cases, see if there is a frequency between void orders of 6, 7, maybe 8 months. Right? That could be a signal for detecting targets. If you see that there is, cases that last a lot of time, and that the orders, repeat there's orders harming one party specifically every 6, 7, or 8 months, and they're immediately followed by a missing document. Right? With those three things, you can probably find hundreds, if not thousands, of cases at a scale in the US with the simple map reduce. I don't mean to brag or anything, but if I had the data, I could probably write this map reduce in a couple of hours. This is not anything complex. It's very simple to do. Any Googler that works in search in data can probably do this for you in 2 hours if you give them the data. Right. So as this was happening, and they were creating this situation with the capias, the two, the order for capias, and then the actual capias that then they disappear from the docket, which was the index 213, 213. Immediately, when they were doing this, an entry in the docket appears saying memorandum of opinion from the First Court of Appeals for petition of Bureau of Mandamus. And then they dismissed that case. That was a case that I created asking the First Court of Appeals to stop the abuse of this court, not respecting the mandatory stay imposed by the fact that the Supreme Court has not ruled in the still verified motion to recuse. So they basically, it was amazing for me to see that this dismissal from the First Court of Appeals came in just in time so Telfair could proceed with creating the capias order. Right? It seemed, you know, the timing, right? Like the timing was perfect. It was such a good timing for them because it gave them the opportunity to proceed with the hearing, create those orders with some legal validity at least, because the Supreme Court they will have, not the Supreme, the First Court of Appeals, they have this document that says that the First Court of Appeals dismissed my petition as something that is not worth even having a hearing about. Right? So it validates what they're doing. And at the same time, because the dismissal happened minutes before the hearing started, then it leaves me with no other recourse. I don't have the time to go and file another petition or to escalate to the Supreme Court of Texas. Right? So the timing, in a way, that protected them in some way, but at the same time left me with no recourse. So that was interesting. And while this order was in there, it wasn't clickable. It was just like a black bold text, but I could not download the actual memorandum. Right. Eventually, it became clickable, and I downloaded it. So I am right now over here. So the next note that I wrote, yes. So then I noticed the appearance of index 213, which is the CAPIAS order that is now disappeared, gone from the docket, and the index 214, which is the order for CAPIAS. It's basically an order instructing the clerk to create the CAPIAS to have me arrested. Right? So there's an order from the judge to the clerk saying, create the CAPIAS and send it to the police. And then there's the actual CAPIAS, which is the one that would get me arrested. And that is signed by the clerk, not by the judge. So two signatures are required for this process to happen. One signature from the judge first to order the clerk to sign the capias and send it to the police. And then a second signature from the clerk signing that capias, and that is the actual capias. That is the actual weapon. And then they send it to the police. So anyhow, I'm noting here when this happened. So this happened at 9:50 a.m. So it was just 50 minutes after the court opened for business. And remember, this hearing was at 9 a.m. So in 50 minutes, 50, they had enough time to, do the what they call the docket call of the day, right? Where the judge calls every single docket that he's going to talk about that morning. It could be that process could last 20, 30 minutes sometimes. Yeah, and I know because I've been there. So that would leave this judge like 20 minutes left. And in those 20 minutes, they had enough time to conduct the hearing, find me in contempt, issue the order verbally to sign that the judge was going to sign the order for copies, and then for for these two documents to be, I mean, the proposed orders, like the two proposed orders to be filed in court. Just in 50 minutes, all this happened. So, and in those orders, this is material because in those orders, there is a description of what happened in the hearing. So it makes me wonder how, in 20 minutes, Troy Pickett was able to capture in his memory what happened in the hearing, and at the same time produce these two complex legal documents in 20 minutes. To be honest, with the servers that I have and the technology that I've developed, I wouldn't be able to do it so fast. But maybe Troy Pickett has something that I don't have, like precognition. Uh, so maybe he knew what was going to be said in the hearing before it actually happened. So then the next note I have, it says, I filed an emergency petition for writ of habeas corpus um, in Talent Technologies envelope 114892,506. I think this is an important one. I can't recall if this is an important one. So, I mean, maybe this is a good point. I don't know if it's this one, but if it's not this one, let me see if it's this one. Let me see if I can. This is an interesting one. I haven't told you this, but it's an interesting. I think it's an interesting thing. Mhm. Yeah, this gentleman in the middle is Justice Terry Adams, which, according to information and belief, I believe he's related to William Cal Adams, who is running the Adams law firm, who did all this in 2025 and 2026. Uh, so I think that case number, if I recall correctly, is 01-26-00516 CB, if I recall correctly. Yeah, so this is a petition for writ of habeas corpus. Hmm, this is interesting. Hmm. Let me see something here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm taking time to think. Let me say something. I was looking for something and I couldn't find it here, and I'm surprised. Let me see if maybe it's here in the other case. Mm, no, it's not this one. Yeah, I think this is the one. No, this is not the one. What could the document be? Mm, yeah, I think they did something here. Let me check. I don't know. Let me try to get it from the docket itself, from the bucket. Because they have a copy, right? And that will let me see if they change it in some way. Sorry, this is gonna take me a minute, but I think it's important to do this to check. Okay, it's not here. No, it's not here. Okay, then let's try something else. Let's go to uh, so this is let me think about this for a second. So this is 11. Okay, what about 10? Which would be the petition that got dismissed. Um, Let me see. No, it's not different. Hmm. This is interesting. Let me check something else here. Maybe in the so we're saying this is not there either. Let's see. Let's check if Scott. Yes. Yes. One second. Okay. So the Scottier case is 26-0511. And I'm looking to see if my filing of almost 40 megabytes is there. Okay, it seems to be there. So on this one, yeah, so I think what they did is that they removed the attachment. So I had attached these to several filings on the first court of appeals, and I think they removed them because it has this. Let me tell you what they're hiding. Yes, this. This is what I want to show you. So in this filing, in the petition for writ of habeas corpus, I did something. I took some creative liberties, I guess. So I filed this exhibit, right? And this exhibit, enclosure A, is an XML file, which is really a KML file. And this is a format of file used by Google Earth. This is a bit technical, but I did this on purpose, right? So this is a way of me of bringing them to my territory, right? Because I mean, this is a legal document, and I can file the technical things in this legal document, and it is on them to understand what I'm saying with this. It's not my responsibility; it's their responsibility. So now they have to understand this, and this is a valid KML file, and what the data that it has is real, and it comes the data that it has, it comes directly from the geo index that was leaked by the Venezuelan intelligence in 2024. And it has important points, geographical points marked in this Google Earth file that have something like 60 houses in Lake One states that are marked with the crypto payments that the Chinese give to these agents, right, to pay for their services. And it has a bunch of other important properties of entities, companies, and people that are working for this network of the CCP. And all this is in this XML file. So that's why they removed it from the attachments in the first court of appeals. I put it in there too. I put it in all the courts. In the 387 as well. There is a filing that should be there that has this attachment. And in the first court of appeals, it was in there. I have a copy. I have to look for it, and I don't want to take time off this declaration to do that, but I'll find it. But what I think they did is that they probably removed it from the filing and left only the upper part of the motion. right? To saying, well, this is an appendix. And I think, technically speaking, they are on the right to do that. I mean, I think the Texas rules of appellate procedures say that the court may discard the appendices, right, if they decide to. So it's possible. I mean, it's not necessarily a violation, is what I'm saying, but I'm sure that it's intentional because this is probably the most nuclear. Let me tell you why. Because this is a roadmap for authorities. If somebody from the DOJ or the FBI gets a hand on this KML file and understand what is in here, it's game over. Because this will allow them to disarm this network here in Houston completely. They won't be able to work in Houston. And Houston is probably one of the most important places for this network in the US because of the oil company. Right? So I don't know. It's this is really. I mean, of all the things that I filed in the last year, I think this enclosure A is probably the most important thing. It's even more important than the de novo things that could give him my son back. To give you an idea of how important this enclosure is, because the things that are encoded here could disarm this network completely. And people that are very high up in the scale of things in the US. So yes, I think I just wanted to, give you a roadmap to this file, to this enclosure. And this is filed on the Supreme Court of Texas. I mean, this is not in any small court. This is the Supreme Court of Texas, and it's on the docket file 26-0511. And this is the file that was filed, the original petition is this, that was filed on May 19, 2026 at 10:35 a.m. And it has I think it's like an ID of submission. It says TEX-115073027. Supreme Court of Texas, Blake A. Souththorne, clerk. So please have this in mind. If you are looking for leads, all you have to do is parse that file and put it in Google Earth, and you're good to go. And it has a lot of things, like it has the Moleros, like all the the properties of the brothers, the father of the Moleros. I mean, the patriarch, I guess, of the family, right? It has a bunch of things, and also in that filing there is also a copy of the bank account information that they have in the Netherlands. And like I have from good sources that this is an accurate information of the bank account. It's all in here, right? And I think also I don't recall if the email from this person. Let me see. Yes, the email from Reverend Daniel King made it into this filing in the Supreme Court of Texas, right? Which he's acknowledging that he's on notice of what he's doing, and that the UU Church is also on notice. So, and all this is in the Supreme Court of Texas. Uh, so this is a roadmap, really. This document is a roadmap for any investigator that may want to look into this. Let me keep going. Yes, anyhow, I filed the petition for writ of habeas corpus in the First Court of Appeals here, but they ignored me. Like they didn't, they haven't, at this point, I haven't received a response. And remember, a petition for habeas corpus is something that is urgent because the person could be arrested, they could lose their liberty, their freedom. And it's something that, I mean, there's no hard timeline in the rules of appellate procedure for this, but it says in a timely manner with a character of urgency, something like that. But they haven't, right? In I don't know. I filed that with them on the 9th, on the 15th or the 14th. I can't recall. Somewhere around that. So it's been more than 10 days or almost 10 days, and they haven't said anything. So then I filed on the 19th with the Supreme Court of Texas. I escalated it. Now, when I was doing this with the First Court of Appeals, there was a series of incidents of obstruction of justice. Really, it all started with they not acknowledging the filing. So I called over the phone, and a woman picked up the phone. I mean, the clerk's office, and she basically hung up on me. She told me, "Oh, you're recording the conversation," and she hung up. Um, But before that, before she hung up, I had a chance to ask her about my filing. I only said my name. I didn't even give her the envelope number or anything like that. And immediately she said, yes, we have it. So it felt to me like she was aware of who I was because I didn't give her enough information to locate the filing, and I didn't hear any typing. There was no delay between me asking the question and she answering, yes, we have it. So it seemed to me like she knew that I was calling. But of course, I cannot be sure. And then she hung up. I called again, and then a gentleman picked up. And he wasn't. I mean, he didn't really help me. He basically told me call later. Um, and this sequence of events is why I ended up escalating to and the non-response to my filing is what I ended up escalating to the Supreme Court for the same type of recourse. And also, yes, there was another kind of obstruction that was more insidious, right? So what happened was I filed a notice of appeal in the trial court, right? And then the clerk of the trial court opened an appellate case. And that appellate case that got opened is 01-26-00511. But then I started appealing the other orders, as I mentioned in the previous segments, because of my strategy of the distributed appeals. Right? I started executing that. But because I said it verbally in these declarations, I imagine they listened to this, right? So they knew what I was trying to achieve, that I was trying to send different appeals to different justices, right? To get them all to either contradict themselves, among them, or act in concert. So what they did is that the clerk of the First Court of Appeals started filing all the notices of appeal in the same case. So he started aggregating them in a single case to only give me one case number. And this would make it so all the appeals would go to a single judge, right? So it would be only one judge, which defeats my strategy. So my strategy was to disaggregate, to split, right? And what they did in response was to aggregate, the opposite, right? So the counter to my strategy is precisely to aggregate the appeals, and that's what he did. And in my notices of appeal, it explicitly says that I would like them to be assessed or judged on their individual merits and basis, because otherwise it's prejudicial to me. Like if you aggregate them all, they could get all dismissed for a procedural reason. Like this is very prejudicial. I would like the appeals to be processed separately, and I'm willing and ready to pay the fee for each one. But he didn't let me do that, right? He aggregated them. So anyhow, I started filing again to create the cases. And then what he did, he would receive the documents. Like if I file a motion, right, he would receive the document, accept it, but he would remove the filing fee. And this make it so, and then aggregate whatever I file into that single umbrella case that he had, the 0511 on the First Court of Appeals. So you see, like he is determined to aggregate all my findings into one case to basically not allow me to execute the strategy that I described. But anyhow, this all resulted in a new petition for writ of mandamus that I filed, asking to compel the clerk to file these things individually, as I'm asking. I want them to be processed because I'm the appellant. I have the right to ask them to be separate because of the same, because it would be prejudicial to anybody, not only to me. It would be prejudicial to anybody to have multiple appeals on the same case judged by a single judge. Right? This is prejudicial by logic, by definition. Especially if the judge is Justice Terry Adams or somebody under Justice Terry Adams, because, well, he's the brother of the attorney that created all these orders, William Kyle Adams. So, nobody, no reasonable person would think this could be objective, like this could be an objective process. Anyhow, I also I filed a motion in this petition asking to transfer these appeals, particular appeals, like for the Order 89 and for the Order 171, in which the Adams law firm, William Kyle Adams, is fleeing the case, right, to avoid prosecution, to transfer those cases to the 14th Court of Appeals. And the rationale here is the same. Like, if the attorney that created these orders that have this child kidnapped is William Kyle Adams, and if he has a familial relationship to Justice Terry Adams, no judge in the First Court of Appeals can be impartial. The only solution here is to transfer this case to the 14th. Right? That's what I'm asking. For those specific orders that could carry criminal liability on William Carl Adams because of the collusion of the last name Adams. Or the other option is that the Justice Terry Adams comes out and explains that they're not related. The other option, right? But neither of those things have happened yet. So that's the state. Um, and because obviously, so I remember I mentioned briefly that the clerk was so he would let me file the documents, but he would remove the payments. So when I file a copy of a notice of appeal, the system applies the payment, which makes the appeal valid, right? So what he does, he removes the payments. So he lets the documents go in, but the payment, he removes it, right? So obviously, this is to aggregate them, right? But he's mishandling the payment submission, and this is not legal. Because he's forcing a situation that is opposite to what I'm submitting. He's making this arbitrary decision himself. So I also fight because this is obviously a weapon. Like they will keep removing the payments to make the appeals void, right? Because there's a time limit. You have to pay this fee in 10 days. If you don't, the appeal gets closed. So imagine that Judge Fair, the situation that I'm envisioning that could happen is Judge Fair uses this void capias order and puts me in prison. And for some reason, imagine, like they set the bond to $25,000, whatever. Like for some reason, I'm not able to get out quickly. If I'm in jail, I will not be able to pay for those appeals that would have kept me out of jail. So, you see the paradox, right? So they're creating a non-payment situation by removing the payment from the submission. And that removal of the payment could create a situation in which if I'm in prison, the appeals will all fail for non-payment. Therefore, getting them a free pass on all the crimes. So because of this, right, and I don't know if they're going to put me in jail, I added there a prayer asking for them to waive all the fees in all my appeals because they're using them as a weapon, right? So I'm just asking them, drop the weapon, right? Put the weapon on the floor for a second, like at least for this case. But they haven't replied to any of that. So let me go to the next note. Yeah, this was serious. So there was an instance in which I filed a version of the motion, right, of a petition. This was envelope. Yeah, the envelope was 1148511762. So I first filed an envelope, right? The first envelope that I filed in reality was 114832234. But I saw something that was wrong with the filing and I wanted to correct. So I canceled that before the clerk accepted it. It was canceled. The submission was canceled. And I refiled, creating a new envelope. This time the envelope was 114851762. And note that the ID is higher than the previous one, right? Because it happened after. Like when my motion to recuse got index 88 and Telfair sign order got index 89 because it happened after. The same principle here. Because it's the same system, standard technology. But anyhow, what the clerk did was that he canceled the latest envelope. So the final envelope, the one that was very good, he canceled it. And then he uncanceled the previous one that I had canceled. He made it active again. And then he submitted that one. So basically, out of the two filings in which one was active and one was canceled, he cherry-picked the canceled one and canceled the active to create a filing that was weak, intentional. So I think that's serious, right? Because that's really manipulating the docket. This is about something I noted. I noted that in the Pierce Court of Appeals, the service contact for Troy Pickett was listed as other party, not as Gloria Espina. And this is critical because if I had not noticed that and I sent the service that way, they could claim that the service was defective because the system did not recognize that Pickett was working for Gloria Espina. You see? So it's also a way of create a defect on the service to then escape liability. Right? That's what they think. Next note is they illegally redacted my address from the notice of change of address I filed on August 2025 to say that they did serve me on the right address. I mean, I have to give you a bit of context. The whole contention here is that during this process, what they've been doing is sending the notices of hearing to the wrong address. But they did not send these things to the valid site property, which is where I live. The reason why they do this is because one of the vectors of attack that they have is that they want to ask for possession of that property as a way to harass, right? To distract me, so I start fighting for the property. Right? So they think that if they start harassing me by taking that from me, I'm gonna get distracted. I'm gonna stop reporting them to the authorities, and I'm gonna start dedicating myself to fight for that property. Right? That's the idea. But they can't do it because I filed a notice with the court in August saying that I live there. So they cannot evict me from my home, right? But their argument is that the house is vacant. That's why Morgan Heibner, on the record on September 8th, made a comment to the judge on the record saying that the house was vacant. To see that into the record, right? But that's not true. The house is vacant. That's my house. I live there. So what they did is that they went into the docket and they redacted my address from that notice of change of address that I filed on that month in August 2025. So nobody can see that they're serving me on the wrong address. You see? But this shows criminal intent because why are they? I mean, if I'm sure I didn't redact it because this is a notice of change of address. If I'm going to give the court notice about my new address, I cannot redact the address because the court wouldn't be able to read it. It's pure logic, right? So they redacted this after the fact. Now, it would be interesting to investigate when the redaction happened because that's probably when the ideation and concert of the mind happened, right? In that time frame. So understanding the reduction time frame is important, or could be a good lead, like what guess, right? To see what was happening in that week. I think, if you ask me, I think this happened around January 7th because that's when they started escalating things. When I reported the judge to the DOJ and Troy Pickett, that's when they went ballistic, right? So I imagine it was around that time. The next note I said, by the way, I forgot to tell you yesterday something I heard from my contact within the Venezuelan team. He said that they had conditioned a secret space within the mall. I think it was Katie Mills. I have to check the messages, but I think it was Katie Mills. But he said that they had conditioned a special space for Suleima Molero Villamizar and Mr. Mendez to be able to meet in person after I had, documented and recorded in one of these declarations about the property at the Bank Court Drive or road. I don't know what it's called. Bank Court. Bank Court is the name of the street. Is that house that is right behind the Villa Sport with a straight line of sight to the Zumba studio where Suleima takes classes. So after I talked about that in one of the declarations, then they condition a space in one mall, I think it's Katie Mills, in which she can go shopping for a shirt for the graduation of Sebas or something like that, right? And then she gets into a store, and then there is the back door, and then they meet, and they can talk in there. So it's just offering that as a tip. Um, yes. Also, I got information that the yellow Lambo of the brother of Suleima is not going to be yellow anymore. Apparently, it's undergoing a serious paint job to change the color, right? So create deniability that what I said was inaccurate or that it wasn't him, whatever. It's what they always do, like hiding the capias, right? Like when what they're doing gets uncovered, what they do is to try to roll it back by hiding it or adding noise, like hiding the capias, the index 213. It's the same thing, but here's a Lamborghini. But it's the same thing. Now, Caleb. Caleb is an interesting. I've been meaning to talk about this, and I have the documents and everything. But this is what happened. The registration of the armored vehicle was going to expire at the end of April. Okay, and I was aware of this. So like 3 days before, and here in Texas, you have to do an inspection to be able to renew the registration. So 3 days before this, I went to one of these places it's a Valvoline, I think it's called. In fact, let me tell you which one it is. That might be important. So if you focus on the Valley Side property, so this is my house at Valley Side Drive, and that oil change place is an oil change place. Is over here. This Valvoline Instant Oil Change is 5530 FM 1463. Full shirt, Texas 7744. So it's a complicated sequence, right? But it was very ingenious. So that's what I mean of them. to do this. Right? So I go there, and the operator says, the car didn't pass inspection. It was because the gas tank cap was missing the O-ring that makes the gas not evaporate. Right? So it was losing some gas, and the computer picks it up, and the car failed, basically. So he tells me, go buy a new cap and come back. But before I leave, he offered, he no, he didn't offer. He tells me, he says, listen, I'm going to reset because the check engine light was on. So he said, I'm going to reset the light. And he connected the OBD2 connector, and he reset the light. And I was grateful because, like, that light is annoying. And he reset it for free. But that thing in reality was a weapon because this I didn't know. I learned it that day. It turns out that if you reset that light, and remember, this was 3 days before the registration expired. And the reason why they were so focused on the registration expiring is because they want to impound the vehicle, to get the equipment, to try to reverse engineer how it works, to then find the informant, right? So that's their end goal, to find who is giving me this information. So what he did, but look how dangerous these people are, right? They're very ingenious. So he reset the check engine light, and I didn't know this, but the consequence of this is that you cannot go and do the mission test again because you have to before the computer can cycle through the oxygen tests that are needed for the check engine sensor and light to be functional. You have to run the vehicle on the highway for something like 100 miles. And it's not like, don't think that it's like you're going to drive 100 miles and that's it. No, like it's in a very specific set of conditions, like from a cold engine start, things like that, right? So in general, it takes like 2 to 3 days at the minimum to perform this cycle. So you can go back and really perform the test. So this put me in a situation in which if I didn't do research on the internet and understand these limitations, I would have had to wait 3 days for be able to come back to this place to do the inspection. And by that time, the registration would have expired, and they would have stopped me with the police, the full share police, probably in this area, and they would have impounded the car, right? And then they would have had a look at any chances to reverse engineer anything I did to the car. So that was the end goal. Now, but interestingly, while this is happening, right, I did some research and I understood that what I had to do was to drive on the highway at a fixed speed of 55 miles per hour for 30 miles, then let the car cool down, then do it again 3 times. And if I did this, it would be ready to be tested again. And this is what I did. I spent the whole day driving the car in this specific way. And then I went back and the car passed, right? Uh, Yes, but in this sequence, then there is this gentleman, Caleb. So there were two technicians that were involved in this. One is the one that reset the that reset the um, that reset the lights, right? The check engine light. And then when that happened, I recorded a small recording on my phone, right? Like memorializing what happened on the first with the first technician. No, sorry, I recorded it on the second technician. So I went back one time and then I talked to the second technician, whose name is Caleb. And Caleb tells me, no, the car doesn't pass. Right? I already had driven it for 100 miles, and I think it would have passed, but I imagine that they have a way to make it not pass. I don't know. But anyhow, after he tells me that it doesn't pass, I go back and I drive another 100 miles. And in this process, in this trajectory, I record an audio in my phone explaining, what is going on with the registration and all this saga, right? And I read his name from the paper, right? But two things interesting happened with him. When I arrived, so the second time I went there, when I talked to Caleb for the first time, when I opened the door, he tells me, well, didn't you come here yesterday? You have to wait 3 days. That's the first thing before saying hello. He told me that I had gone there yesterday or in the morning. Yeah, that I had gone there in the morning, or was the day before? I can't recall. But he basically had knowledge that I had been there before, and that I had to wait to come back to redo the inspection before even saying hello to me. And this is interesting because he wasn't there when I did the first inspection. The other technician I talked to wasn't him, And he wasn't there because I looked at all of them and I have recordings of the in the cameras, right? He wasn't there. So anyhow, somebody, my read of the situation, somebody told him who I was, and he was expecting for me to go there to tell me that I had to wait, right? So they can impound the car. So after this happened, I recorded something in my phone, memorializing this sequence. And then I drove 100 miles and I came back. And when I came back, he was upset. I mean, his face, he could not hide the fact that he was upset at me. I imagine because he knew that I had created this audio privately in my phone inside my car, 50 miles away, but he knew that I had talked about him. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. Um, Now, there's another interesting thing here. In this process, right, when I see that there is a risk that the car may not pass, I decide to go to that building where the justice place is. This is Grand Corner Drive. Grand Corner Drive, okay. And there is a tax assessor collector office in there, which handles things related to the DPS, to the department that processes the registrations, the equivalent to the DMV in California, right? Uh, So I go here to the yeah, it's Fort Bend County Constable. Yeah, the Fort Bend County Tax Office North Annex. 22333 Grand Corner Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. So when I get there, I mean, two things that I want to tell you. Right, one is that I'm not sure about this. I have to check the recordings, and I haven't had the time to do it. But I believe that in one of the occasions that in February, I think, when I went to this court the first time, I believe I saw that there were exterior cameras mounted on the surface of the property. And this day that I was doing this thing with the registration when driving the car, I went there and I didn't see the cameras in the surface. Maybe a mistake. I have to check. But it seemed to me like they removed the cameras. It could be because the incident that happened in that court in which I asked for the recordings of the cameras, right? So maybe they took a step of removing, at least the exterior ones. I don't know, but I didn't see the cameras. Now, interestingly, let me tell you why I went there, because I'm seeing that maybe the car will not pass, right? So, and I'm running out of time. So it occurred to me to go there and apply for a temporary permit. There is a permit that you can apply for and get, paying, I don't know, $60, that allows you to drive the car for 30 days or something like that, until you get a chance to get it fixed and to pass the inspection. Right? So as I'm doing that, I get into the office and the office is full of people. I mean, there could have been, I don't know, 100 people in that office. Like I see that it's going to take me hours to get out of there. And I also get the feeling that, they are looking to see if I get in or if I don't. I mean, there's people in the room that are like paying attention to me. Uh, and I'm an unknown person. They shouldn't have been doing that. Anyhow, I didn't get a good feeling. And I thought, I better get out of here because they will tamper with the car. I mean, that's what I thought. I mean, they know that I have to do the inspection. So one thing that they could do, and they know that the gas cap doesn't have a key because I just bought this generic gas cap in the morning, right? So I calculated that maybe what they were going to do was to put something like an additive on the tank that could create higher emissions, and then the car will not pass the emissions in weeks. Right? So I know I got out of there immediately. And when I did that, I saw that there was a great truck parked next to my vehicle, and that truck left running, speeding. Like that guy was in a hurry to leave, so I could not see his face. So, I think that's probably the person that was going to tamper with the vehicle. I imagine, right? Because of the way he left. Now, I said the thing of the cameras before because I looked immediately to see if there were cameras capturing this spectacle, and I couldn't see any cameras. So I don't know. Maybe the cameras are there, but I couldn't see them. Maybe they're not. But, if authorities see this and you check those cameras on that day, it was at the end of April. I think it was on the 28th or something, 29th of April. Um, Probably you will see who was that person in that gray truck. It was a pickup truck, gray, darker gray, and late model. I think it was a Chevrolet, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. So anyhow, that's what I'm gonna say about that. Yeah, so this is funny. I wrote a note here says, Dan, don't hate the player, hate the game. And the name of the game is Karma. This is to Dan King, the Reverend, right? The Reverend Attorney King. because the informant told me that he got upset. He got personally upset when he was told that I mentioned him and that I posted the email that he sent me in the document in the Supreme Court of Texas. So he is aware, and he is upset. Like, he's super upset. So I'm telling him to, don't be upset. Don't hate the don't hate the player, hate the game, because he participated in the organization of the situation with the court on the 387th and the child and all that. So if you're not, don't do this. If you don't want to do the time, don't do the crime. Right? Um, anyhow, yes, yeah. So this is an incident. I'm not going to talk about that for now. Uh, yeah, it's an incident with Larry Ryan. They were basically trying to create a situation in which they could justify a charge for. They could fabricate a situation in which they could say that I was endangering the child. And this was out of desperation because they saw that I was filing these things with the Supreme Court of Texas, with the First Court of Appeals, documents that are now on the record that has all this evidence. The KML file of Google Earth is now on the Supreme Court of Texas. So they were trying to find a way to justify the unjustifiable. Right? So they did a ruse with Larry Ryan and an utility company directly influenced by Larry Ryan and Direct Energy. So if authorities see this, look into the Google Cloud bucket, and you will find relevant information about this. The blinds. I don't know if I think I mentioned this before, right? That I figured out that the blinds is how the houses receive the infrared communication. That's So I'm gonna read what I wrote, okay, instead of like rehashing the logic. So I wrote the blinds. The infrared sensors are in the blinds. For example, Joel creates windows blinds. This is why the headquarters of blinds.com in Houston, Texas is marked in the GeoIndex of Diosdado Cabello with a score of almost 8 million points. And is very close to Royal Oaks, the gated community where they have the brother, or they had the brother of Zuleima Molero Villamizar. Yes, there's another point. Uh, it's a property that it's close to Lake Point Estates, okay, and it's a company that is called Katy Blinds and Shutters or something like that. And it's the building, the roof is painted in that particular color of red that they use to mark properties that are on the track. So basically, the technique is that they place specific important properties on the ground track of the Starlink satellites. And this is important because it makes it so that these properties always have Starlink satellites passing on top of, like, above them. And this allows them to bounce signals of the satellites without collaboration of the satellites. And I described this technique in one of my previous demos like a year ago, or 8 months ago. So these are important nodes, like very sensitive nodes. And a case in point, let me probably show you, right? So if you go to the live search, and the alignment of these properties with the Starlink satellite track is amazing. It's like less than 20 miles deviating from the ground track. Uh, Let me. Okay. Yes. So you see this tone of red of this ceiling of this roof. That's the tone of red. And there's different variations. So there's also different colors of roofs that signify other things. But for example, here the alignment of these aligns perfectly In fact, let me show you in Google Earth. This is probably no, I don't want to do that because the browser could crash. But it aligns this church, this church aligns perfectly on the path of the ground track of the Starlink satellites with this other property over here, the 2630 Saddlehorn Trail, which, according to the informant, after I found all this, I mean, he told me this after the fact. He told me that here they really had at some point, until recently, one of the brothers of Suleiman, Molero Villamizar as well. It was the younger brother that was the one that installed the, I don't know if it's the brother, but yeah, I think it's the brother. He said the brother. It's the guy that installed the doggy gate at the Valley Side property in 2016. That guy is or was in that property. So that's how they communicate, right? By bouncing signals of the satellite and then getting them to the other house, to the next node, basically. It's a series of nodes on the ground track of a Starlink. So if you do that, so they have, I mean, I don't want to get too technical here, but there's one track going on the, say, southeast to northwest direction. So that diagonal that I'm describing, like that church to that house that I was describing, right? This path over here. And there's another track that is on the southwest to northeast direction, right? So for example, in that track, this church aligns with, for example, this property, right? Which is an auto service company, of course. It also aligns with this garage, the Cube Smart garage, right? And you can see the red marker is this piece of the roof. It also aligns with, I mean, there's a bunch, like this repeats and repeats and repeats. But here there is one that is a blinds company that is next to a school. So the marker is really the school, I think. Yes. So the red marker is this running track, and the blinds company is next to it here. Yeah, Katy Blinds and Shutter, 6819 Highway Boulevard, Suite 680, Katy, Texas. The reason for the focus on the blinds company is because the blinds is where they install the sensors for the infrared that it gets transmitted by the cars. So this is how the houses can get, data directionally with infrared at night. Well, and during the day as well, but at night there's less noise. Because, like for example, in this case, my cameras are emitting infrared, right? So that, could get in the way. Also, I figured that they have different wavelengths that I think are different channels, really, for different, I guess, levels of security, right? And I know this because some of my cameras can see some wavelengths and some other cameras see other wavelengths, and I can tell that they have different channels in this. But anyhow, the blinds and shutters companies are a thing and are very important. And I think in my notes I also give you a few ideas. So I'm gonna just read what I wrote. Right? This is why the HQ of blinds.com is marked, right? I mentioned that this is also why one of the points of the Starlink ground track, which is what we're just describing right now, that aligns with the live church of Phil Denning, is a blinds and shutters company. And this is why Alejandro Troconis made that strange request in 2014 for me to buy a specific blinds for a rental apartment that this network put me on 2014 in Montreal, next to the Palais de Congrès in Montreal, right? So anyhow, also importantly, let me show you this, right? Because it's more graphical. So if you go to YouTube, you go to call mobile V6. Yes, so this is, I call this the Lanham window. And basically, I mean, Lanham is a gentleman that has a house like 2 houses down, right? And so he has this special window that is basically a structure like this, right? He has the blinds on the bottom, and the blinds are receiving pulses of light from the light charge. It has a straight line of sight, and I saw these pulses myself because these are not infrared; these are visible. Like some of the channels are on the visible light spectrum, and the one that he has with the light charge is on that wavelength. And I was doing something because the informant told about this, and I got on top of a chair to look to check it out, and I was able to see the live charge, beaming the window of Langham. So the setup is that he has the blinds on the lower part and the window doesn't have tinted. Um, it's not tinted glass, right? So the visible light can get in easily, even during the day. And on the upper side, it's tinted, right? So you see the setup from outside, and you think that the whole window has blinds, but in reality, the upper part is a segment that he can open, and then he can observe visually the target. The target being me running on the backyard. This is how they track exactly what is that I'm doing in the backyard when they're trying to figure out how I communicate. And this is a long story. I'm not going to get into that, but like I guess at some point people will see what I mean. Yes. Show the design of the Lanham window. And then I say, note, blinds.com is probably a gold mine for the FBI, as it will allow to trace exactly where the agents are concentrated, which means finding the targets. It's simple. Find the points where multiple of these blinds ended up in the same 500 feet area, even if through different distribution channels. For example, even if they were sold by the Katie Shutters and Blinds company that I was showing you. But if those blinds really came from blinds.com or one of their warehouses, then you should fly, right? But that at some point pass through blinds.com supply chain because that's the aggregator. And I know that because they have the highest score of any blinds company in Houston. This can be done with a simple map reduce. I would use the size of the blinds and shutters, the price, whether the size is a custom, non-standard size, or made to order or bespoke, and the average home price in the installation of the street as ranking signals. I mean, I'm just giving you ideas on how you can find the prominent agents. Like, for example, if you look at Joel Gray, he has an oversized window that is probably the size of that, of this wall, right? And it has a custom-made blind that looks like made of wood. Well, I'm sure that's probably intentional. And that blind is where John Miko fires and beams his directional light transmission when I turn on the antenna, the satellite antenna. And I have this recorded in video hundreds of times. So, if you applied this algorithm with a map reduced, you would have found Joel Gray easily, right? Because of the size of the window and the price of the shutters, and also the fact that the size, the dimensions of that window specifically, is non-standard. It's a custom window. So, this would have given me away. And of course, you can complement that with the data of the GeoIn. It will be trivial to find the important ones. Yes, I also know that the reason why this is a gold mine is not so much about the ranking signals, but because these blinds require custom installation. So in these companies that sells this blind, you will have to find the actual address of the installation, which means the actual address of the agent. So this is a place where they cannot obscure the address, and therefore it's a vulnerability for them. And I know this because when Alejandra Troconis basically made me buy the blinds, basically to equip the apartment so she could communicate in this way with her, partner, I imagine. Then, I had to go through this process and I had to schedule the installation. I had to give the address. I have to wait for the guy. They took measurements. They did all this. So it's a very custom process. Okay. In my next note, I have internal notes, debug this. Yes, cluster of houses containing an IP attorney, a family attorney, and a reverend in contiguous or nearby houses. This is related to what I was describing before in the previous part about that cluster of houses in the United States that have Reverend Attorney Reverend King, Attorney Robert Clark, and Attorney Terrell Miller all together in front of Robert Miller. Like that, this is what I said. At points, if the cluster is close to the house ending in 6, intelligence, like the house of uh, Mueller. I also note that the Mueller-King-Clark-Miller cluster is just an example of this potential template. But don't be fooled by the high level of these individuals. If it's a template, it probably repeats at lower levels in society as well. Meaning, for example, maybe where Troy Pickett lives, there is somebody that maybe is not a partner at a law firm, but maybe it's a litigation attorney. And somebody from that works in the DOJ is not the director of the FBI, but it's somebody that works at the DOJ. Right? So you may find this template at different levels in society. Is what I'm trying to signify. Yes, I mean this is kind of chilling. So I'm not gonna get into this because it's a long story, but the informant told me that because I've always asked this question of when this started, really, because I see all these things that go back years, right? And he told me that this all for me it all started around 1997, and this came from a person called Jesus Monzon, who was a guy that went to the same university that I went to in Venezuela. And we had a disagreement, a business disagreement. I was doing a business at the time, and he became involved, but we had sort of a fallout. And in retaliation, he and his father, I think, basically engaged the Venezuelan intelligence, to harass me. Right? And this is how I became a target 20, almost 30 years ago, right? 29 years ago. But then, for some reason, they didn't let go, right? Uh, then I went to Canada. The thing escalated and has been escalated until this point where they have the child kidnapped. Right? But this all started with Jesus Monzon. This is what the informant told me. Next note says the metal ladder of Heather Williams. This is funny. So when I see last week, right, that the live church of Philip Denning is transmitting to the window of Lanham, what I did immediately was to get a metal ladder that I have, and I mounted a camera on top. It's a tall ladder, one of those little giant, I think it's called, right? It's very tall, like it stretches, right? And I put a camera. I think it would be probably like 12 feet, maybe 13 feet above ground, right? In between the church and Lanham. My goal is I recorded some of the pulses, right, to try to decode them and decrypt them. But the funny thing is that when I did that, I then started working on something, and I noticed that Joel Gray started beaming. John Miko started beaming the window, the blinds, really the shutters of Joel Gray. So I understood that they were intercepting the downlink again, and it became obvious to me that it's the ladder. Right? So I asked the informant, and he confirmed again. Yes, the ladder is bugged. So that ladder is important because that ladder I didn't buy it. That ladder, when I purchased the property in Valleyside Drive, that ladder was left by the previous owner, hanging on a wall. It's one of those ruses in which you conveniently find something that you need, right? And then you keep it. Well, Heather Williams, when she sold me the house, she left that ladder there, and that ladder is bought. Um, and that's how they were intercepting. So it's funny to me because I was trying to get their communications, but in the process, because they have had this bug inserting into my life for at this point 12 years, I put the bug in a place close to the antenna that would allow them to intercept my communication. Right? So it's funny. Like, I mean, I created my own risk in that situation. Uh, yes. This is interesting, right? It's an idea, right? And I've been debugging this, and it's a thing. I can tell you right now that it is a thing. I'm going to read what I wrote, and I offer to. I can talk about this topic at this point. I have gathered so much knowledge about this specific point that I could talk about this for 2 hours without stopping. And I offer to the authorities that when I have the opportunity to be free from this, I'm at your disposal. If you want me to tell you what I know, I will. But here I'm just going to read what I understood. Okay, I mean when I wrote this note. So I wrote symmetrical numbers seeded from prime numbers as prominence rankers seem to be used in street numbers and also in tax roll numbers, at least in Fort Bend County. Direct energy has one of these roles, notably the role R16061. Here, the prime number is 61, and the 16 is just the prime number reversed. So, if you score this with the Muppet scorer looking for prime numbers or prime numbers reversed, the score would be high for this roll number. And this roll number is basically 14220 School Street, Needville, Texas 77461. It's an utility easement, and this technique I've seen it countless of times where they mark important agents by putting a direct energy easement outside of the property, but the marker is the easement. And now I understand that the marker, what encodes the meaning of the marker, is the roll number in the Fort Bend County property tax office. Imagine what this means. It means that this is so heavily integrated into the governmental infrastructure, local infrastructure of Fort Bend County, that they're assigning their roll numbers intentionally to encode information for the Chinese. I mean, this is it's it's mind blowing, really, because as a taxpayer, I pay taxes for that, record systems to exist, and it's being used to harm me and to harm many other people. Right? So it's crazy that they're using taxpayer money to do this. Right? It's mind blowing. And with this technique, after as I'm telling you, like this is just the beginning of how I discovered this. But then I discovered a bunch of other things that I'm not going to repeat here because it would be 3 hours. But I was able to discover a lot of important people in this network, and they are encoded in that KML file that is in the Supreme Court of Texas. I put them all there, right? Because I know how important they are. So I'm going to keep reading. Yes. So this property I was describing in 14216 is registered to Morris Leo Woods. And Woods, we know, is a marker as well. Another notable property is 16016, Dipple Road Guy, Texas 77494. So here, the marker is the same principle, but it's in the street number. And I can tell you that it has more power, scoring power, if it's in the roll number that is in the street number. I mean, if the prime numbers in this way are encoded in the roll number, it's more prominent than if it's encoded in the street number, which makes sense because the roll number is harder to change. So they use the roll number for very important things, not for everybody. My next note says, informant told me on May 19 that the house with the red roof at the 2630 Saddlehorn Trail, Katy, Texas, located right on the Starling ground track and being the node right after the Life Church of Phil Denning, it was occupied by the same young man who installed the doggy gate on 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas, my home, in 2016. From what he said, it implied that it could be one of Suleima's brothers, Suleima being formerly known as Flores. Yeah, I can't recall the wording of the message, but it wasn't clear if it's the brother or not. But it's that guy, he's the one that installed the doggy gate. Then I note observation. It seems like most of these properties in Fort Bend County that align with the Starling ground track and two have roofs painted in that particular tone of red, they share something in common. They have more than one county tax rolls associated with the GOID of the property. Sometimes multiple personal rolls designated with the P, as in Peter, prefix, and one commercial roll, tax roll, like something lease, like a lease of equipment, lease of a tractor, lease of a car, things like that, designated with the R, a prefix, which in this system that they have, I mean, Fort Bend County means commercial. I imagine the commercial tax roll is the marker. That way, they can move them around. They can reassign the equipment to another house if they need to move the agent. It's easier that way. I imagine probably the specifics of the lease may encode information as well, like the serial numbers. If it's a John Deere tractor, for example, maybe the serial number or the VIN number of the tractor encodes a meaning, right? Because they control the company, they can put whatever number they want in the serial number. I will debug this more, which I have done, and the result of my debugging is on that KML file. Which again, I repeat to authorities, that is probably the most valuable thing that I have filed in the last year. Is that KML file? I mean, to you, that will be more valuable than anything that I could have filed before. And here I give you some examples, right? Kind of a taste, so you can get a taste. 1035 Greenbush Road, Katy, Texas, 77494, and the role is R44991. By the way, this is not limited to prime numbers. There are other rules that I discovered, but prime numbers are more significant. Also, you have, I think this is 1430 Katy Freewheeling Road, Katy, Texas. And the role is R331924, commercial. Yeah, there's one that has a V designation. It's a KDSD, but I can't recall the number. Yeah, it's well, let's find it, right? Because we have the roll number, right? But this can be the roll number. The roll number, I think, is 6 digits. So 6 would be until here, let's say. Mhm. Yeah, this one. So it's 6331 Highway Boulevard, Katy, Texas, 77494. By the way, when I typed this in the calendar, which is where I originally typed it, it had spaces between the roll number and the addresses. It's possible that they mean the network, right? They go into because they have people at Google. Maybe they remove the spaces to make this unreadable, unparsable, right? Or hard to parse. I don't know. But anyhow, this is the example of the KDSD, and this is interesting because this property has B. One of the roles that it has starts with D, and that is very rare. And in information retrieval, when you see something that is very rare, it usually means prominent. So there might be something special with the D prefixes on the tax rolls in Fort Bend County, at least. Now it doesn't have it anymore. Well, and this is a $185 million. It's the price value. I mean, this has to be a huge property. I'm curious, what is this? I mean, it's almost $0.2 billion. It's a lot of money. Oh, it's precisely that property. It's the property that aligns with the ground track of Starlink connecting to the live church of Philadelphia. So that's the property in question. But anyhow, the tip is, the tax roll numbers, the tax roll numbers are a thing, for sure. At least in foreign country. Yes, and I have other examples here, like the cubes part, and there's other. So I don't know, like this is a super fascinating topic. How they're using the tax roll numbers for this scoring system that is basically based on Google Muppet. I can tell you that because I worked with that for years. They're using Google Muppet to score the tax roll numbers and to score the license plates and to score the phone numbers and to score the street addresses. It's like their silver bullet. They're using it for everything, which is the same thing that we used to do at Google. We use Muppet for everything. Any problem you would have that was hard to solve, if you knew how to use Muppet and you were good at it, you would use Muppet. Like you could solve any problem with that thing, and that's what they're doing. And that gives you an idea of the level of involvement that I was describing before. So anyhow, with that thought, I think I'm gonna I'm gonna close that. I want to close this segment. Yeah, well, one small thing. In this saga with the First Court of Appeals, I filed a document asking, to transfer the appeals. Right? And I make the point that I believe that William Kyle Adams is related to Justice Terry Adams, and that makes the situation improper. Right? All this made me wonder why is that G. Troy Pickett has not replied to any of those filings, because she sometimes replies right very aggressively to what I filed, but here he is silent. So I don't know. It's strange to me that he hasn't come out to say that they're not related. He should come out and file a document saying that William Kyle Adams and Terry Adams are not related. Or I don't know, but he hasn't replied anything. So I'm just wondering, right? What's up with that? Anyhow, I think I'm gonna cut this segment here, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much, and have a good night.